The smell of burnt meatloaf still makes me smile, even now. It was the last good memory I had of Mom, just the two of us in the kitchen of the old house. I was 26 then, home for a visit, trying to impress her with a recipe I'd found online. The smoke alarm had wailed, Mom had shrieked with laughter, and we'd ended up ordering pizza, eating it on paper plates at the kitchen island, our faces streaked with flour and tears of mirth. That was 8 months ago. Now, the memory feels like a cruel trick, a ghost of a life I no longer have. My name is Willow Hunt, and I turned 27 2 months after Mom's funeral. For the past 8 months, grief has been my constant companion, a heavy blanket I pulled over myself, shutting out the world. After the funeral, I'd retreated to my small apartment across town, barely answering calls, letting the silence of my own space swallow me whole. I didn't want to see anyone, talk to anyone, especially not family. My mother, Zariah, had been the only real family I had left, and without her, the world felt like a muted, distant hum. Before I go on, comment below where in the world you're watching this from. I'd spent weeks just existing, scrolling mindlessly through social media, trying to find a distraction from the ache in my chest. That's how I first saw it. A photo, posted by someone I didn't recognize, but the background. It hit me like a physical blow. It was my old bedroom, my childhood bedroom. But it wasn't mine anymore. The walls were a garish pink, the old floral curtains replaced with something sparkly. And there, in the middle of the room, striking a pose with a wide fake smile, was Jasmine Barnes. Jasmine Barnes, my Uncle Shane's new girlfriend. She was also 27, just like me, but that's where the similarities ended. She was all sharp angles and manufactured cheer, the kind of person who documented every single moment of her life online. And now, she was documenting my life. The photos kept coming. A pool party in the backyard, where my old tire swing used to hang from the oak tree. My mother's rose garden, now ripped up and replaced with a concrete patio. Each picture was a fresh stab, a public desecration of everything I held sacred. My home, my mother's sanctuary. It was like watching someone dismantle my memories, piece by piece, and then parade them around for likes. I tried to ignore it, to tell myself it didn't matter. The house was just a house. But it wasn't. It was Mom. It was us. Then, 2 months ago, a thick envelope arrived in the mail. No return address, just my name typed neatly on the front. Inside, nestled among official-looking papers, was a copy of a deed, the deed to my childhood home. My eyes scanned the document, my breath catching in my throat. The transfer date was 6 months ago, just 2 months after Mom had passed. And the sale price? $14,000. $14,000. For a house in a desirable suburban neighborhood, a house Mom had poured her life into. It was a joke, a cruel, sick joke. The buyer listed was Jasmine Barnes. My hands shook as I dialed Shane's number. My mother's older brother, my Uncle Shane Wallace, 45 years old and perpetually looking for an angle. He'd always been estranged, a shadowy figure on the periphery of our lives, only resurfacing when he needed something. My mother had tolerated him, but I'd always felt a prickle of unease around him. Now that unease curdled into pure rage. He answered on the third ring, his voice gruff. "Willow, to what do I owe the pleasure?" "The house, Shane," I said, my voice dangerously calm. "What did you do?" There was a beat of silence, then a sigh. "Oh, that. Look, Willow, it was just sitting there. You weren't using it. Jasmine needed a place and it was a good deal for her." A quick cash sale. No fuss. A good deal? I practically spat the words. $14,000? That house is worth 10 times that, at least. How could you just sell it? It was Mom's. Look, Zariah didn't have a will, things were complicated, he said, his voice taking on that dismissive tone he always used when he wanted to shut down a conversation. I handled everything. It's done. Move on. Move on? My voice rose, cracking with disbelief. You sold my home to your girlfriend for pocket change? You didn't even tell me? You were grieving, Willow, he said, a patronizing edge to his voice. I didn't want to bother you with the details. It was just a house. You weren't living there. He hung up before I could respond. Just a house. He truly believed that. He truly believed he could just take it. The next morning, I drove to the storage facility on the edge of town. The one Mom had rented years ago, filled with old furniture and boxes she'd never quite unpacked from her own mother's estate. I found the unit, unlocked the heavy door, and stepped inside, the stale air thick with dust and forgotten memories. I walked past covered couches and stacks of old photo albums until I found it. A small, tarnishing metal lockbox tucked away in a corner, just as I remembered. It was heavy, and when I shook it, something rattled inside. I pulled it out, cradling its weight in my hands. You took the wrong house, I whispered, my voice barely audible in the quiet storage unit. You have no idea what you just started. The metal lockbox felt cold and heavy in my hands as I walked out of the storage unit, the door clanging shut behind me. It wasn't just a box. It was a promise. A promise to Mom, and a threat to Shane. He thought he'd gotten away with something, that my grief would make me a passive victim. He didn't count on me remembering. He didn't count on me being my mother's daughter. My first stop wasn't a lawyer, not yet. It was the county records office. I spent hours there, sifting through public documents, trying to make sense of what Shane had done. The clerk, a kindly older woman, patiently explained the process for obtaining death certificates, property records, and probate filings. What I found made my blood run cold. Mom, Zariah Hunt, had never finalized her will. She'd talked about it, even drafted something years ago, but it had never been signed, never notarized. It was just a stack of papers in a drawer, and because there was no valid will, Shane, as her only living sibling, had swooped in. He'd filed paperwork claiming to be the executor of her estate. And there it was, staring me in the face, a power of attorney document dated just 3 weeks after Mom's funeral. Her signature looked off, not quite right. It was too neat, too precise for someone who had been so frail in her final days. This wasn't just opportunistic. It was outright fraud. That's when I knew I needed help. Not just any help, but someone who understood the legal labyrinth I was about to enter. Someone I could trust. My mind immediately went to Valerie Lowe. Valerie was 32 now, 5 years my senior, but we'd been inseparable as kids. She'd moved away for law school and we'd drifted, as friends sometimes do. But I remembered her fierce sense of justice, even back then. She'd always been the one to stand up to bullies on the playground. Now she was a probate attorney. Perfect. I called her office, half expecting to get an assistant. Instead, Valerie picked up herself. Willow? Is that really you? It's been ages. Her voice was warm, familiar. Hey, Val, I said, my voice a little shaky. Yeah, it's me. Look, I wouldn't call unless it was important. I need your help. My uncle? He sold Mom's house. I laid out the whole story, the $14,000, Jasmine's Instagram posts, the forged POA. I could hear the shift in her tone as I spoke, the initial surprise turning into a quiet, simmering anger. Shane Wallace, huh? She finally said, a hard edge to her voice. That man always was a snake. I remember him trying to pull some fast one on your mom when we were kids, something about a loan he never repaid. He's always been bad news. Look, Willow, I'm specializing in estate law now. Bring me everything you've got. I'll do this. Not just for you, but honestly, just to see Shane lose. That was Valerie, She didn't ask for details about my grief or how I'd been. She just saw the injustice and wanted to fix it. It was exactly what I needed. While Valerie started digging into the legal side, I kept my own quiet surveillance going. Social media was a goldmine for people like Jasmine, and apparently for my cousin, Harmony Davis. Harmony, 45, Shane's daughter from a former marriage, had always been a piece of work. She was the kind of cousin who'd mock my clothes at family gatherings, who'd whisper about my mom behind her hand. I found her Facebook profile, public of course, and there it was, a string of posts, not directly naming me, but clearly aimed. Some people just can't let go of the past. Like, it's just a house, get over it, emo cousin who couldn't let go, new beginnings. Fresh start, bye Felicia. Another one, a few weeks later. So glad Dad finally cleared out that old place. It was just sitting there, collecting dust. Now it's got life. Some people just love to wallow, not us. Positive vibes. Moving on. Each post was a punch, but I didn't flinch. I didn't comment, didn't react. My goal wasn't to fight them online or even to argue with them. It was to take everything. To make them feel the loss, the way I had. Harmony's mocking just added fuel to the fire, solidifying my resolve. They thought I was weak, that I was just a sad, grieving girl. They were wrong. A few days later, an email popped up from Valerie. The subject line was, Update, Zariah Hunt Estate. I clicked it open, my heart thumping. She'd found more than just the forged POA. She'd found something else. The last line of her email made me freeze. By the way, your mom owned 2 properties. Not one. Your mom owned 2 properties, not one. Valerie's email stared back at me, the words echoing in my head. My mother, Zariah, had always been so private about her finances. I knew she was careful, but 2 properties? This was a complete shock. I immediately called Valerie. What are you talking about, Val? 2 properties? I asked, my voice a mix of confusion and a sudden, sharp surge of hope. Yeah, it's weird, she explained. It's a small parcel of land, maybe an acre just outside the city limits. She bought it years ago, probably before you were even born. It's been sitting there, undeveloped. No structures, just raw land. It's not connected to the house property at all, totally separate deed. Shane didn't even list it in the probate paperwork he filed. He probably didn't know about it or just overlooked it because it wasn't a house. My mind raced. A small plot of land. Why would Mom own something like that? Here's the kicker, Valerie continued. I did some digging, and that little acre? It borders a massive new development. They're building luxury homes, a whole new community. That land, if it were rezoned, would be worth a fortune. Even as it is, it's sitting right next to prime real estate. It has huge hidden value. Hidden value. The words resonated with me. My mother, always so quiet, so unassuming, had left me more than I ever knew. More than Shane thought. This wasn't just about getting the house back anymore. This was about something bigger. So, it's still legally mine? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Yep, since there was no will and Shane only claimed the house in his fraudulent probate filing. This parcel of land was never transferred. It's technically still part of your mother's estate, and as her sole heir, it defaults to you. We just need to go through the proper probate channels for this property, which will be much simpler. A plan began to form in my mind, a slow, methodical burn. This wasn't just about getting even. This was about leverage. Val, I said, a new resolve in my voice. Do you know any forensic accountants? Someone who specializes in, say, undeclared assets, tax evasion? Valerie paused. Funny you ask. I have an old college acquaintance, Pablo Oliver. He's 36 now, brilliant with numbers, and he used to work for the IRS. He's a bit of a maverick, but he knows how to find things. Why? Because Shane Wallace isn't just a snake, I said, looking at the lockbox on my desk. He's a tax cheat, and I think this land might be the key to proving it. Valerie set up a meeting with Pablo a week later. He was exactly as she described, sharp, intense, with a quiet confidence that made you trust him instantly. I told him about the house, the $14,000, the forged POA, and then I showed him the deeds to the second property. "So, you want me to look into your uncle's finances?" Pablo asked, his gaze steady. "What's in it for me? I don't work cheap." "The land," I said, pointing to the deed. "It's undeveloped, but it's valuable. If you help me expose Shane, I'll give you a percentage of whatever we get from this property once it's sold. It'll be a lot more than your usual fee, and it'll be clean." "No messy clients, just a straightforward deal." Pablo's eyes narrowed, considering. "A percentage, huh? Interesting. You're playing a long game, Willow." "They started it," I said simply. "I'm just changing the rules." He agreed. Within days, Pablo was a ghost in the system. He started with public records, business filings, and then moved on to more discreet channels. He quickly discovered Shane had 3 rental properties under his name, properties I knew nothing about. They were in different towns, managed by different companies. But the kicker was when Pablo cross-referenced them with Shane's income tax filings. "He's declared 0 assets on his personal income tax for the last 5 years, Pablo reported, his voice flat. "And the rental income he has declared? It barely covers the mortgages. It looks like he's running a shadow business, probably taking cash payments under the table or claiming massive fraudulent deductions." "He's been funneling money somewhere. This is textbook tax fraud, Willow, and it's not small potatoes." Pablo then explained how tax liens worked. If a property owner failed to pay their property taxes, the county would put a lien on the property, which could then be purchased by investors. If the owner didn't pay up, the lien holder could eventually foreclose and take ownership. It was a slow, quiet, legal way to seize assets. "We can start buying up the liens on Shane's properties," Pablo suggested. "It's a public record, but it's not something he'd necessarily notice immediately unless he was checking constantly. It's a quiet way to put pressure on him, and it gives us leverage." Over the next few weeks, with Pablo's guidance and some of the money I had saved from my own job, I started buying up tax liens on Shane's rental properties. It was a strange feeling, like playing a silent, high-stakes chess game. Each purchase was a small, satisfying victory. One evening, as I was scrolling through Facebook, I saw a new post from Harmony. It was a rant, full of capital letters and angry emojis. "Can you believe this? Dad just got audited out of nowhere. The IRS is going through everything. Crazy. Some people just have to ruin things for everyone. IR sucks. Shark family drama. Unbelievable." I smiled. A slow, quiet, deeply satisfying smile. It was working. Harmony's Facebook rant about Shane's audit was the first real crack in their facade, and it felt good. Not just good, but right. It confirmed Pablo was doing his job, and that my quiet moves were having a real impact. It had been about 2 months since I first contacted Valerie, and in that time, my life had shifted from passive grief to active strategy. I was still Willow, but a sharper, more focused version. With the IRS audit looming over Shane and me quietly buying up liens on his rental properties, the pressure was mounting. But the house, my mother's house, was still occupied by Jasmine. That was the primary target. Valerie had been relentless in her research. She'd found a loophole, a small but significant detail that Shane and Jasmine had overlooked in their rush to steal the property. "Okay, so here's the deal," Valerie explained over the phone one evening, her voice buzzing with excitement. "Because Shane used a fraudulent power of attorney to transfer the deed, the original sale to Jasmine is technically invalid. It's a voidable transaction. On top of that, Jasmine, as the new owner, never properly filed for the required renovation permits, and she's been delinquent on the property taxes for the last quarter." I sat up straighter. Delinquent on taxes? But she just moved in 6 months ago. Exactly, Valerie confirmed. She probably thought she could just ride it out or that Shane would handle it. But the county doesn't care who's living there, they care who's on the deed and who's paying up. And because of the manipulated inheritance laws, specifically the fact that the house should have gone through proper probate as part of your mother's estate, not a fraudulent sale, and Jasmine's lack of notarized occupancy documents, we have a window. The county tax office has flagged the property for non-payment and lack of permits. It's a mess on their end. This was it, the opening I'd been waiting for. So what does that mean for me? It means we can submit a quiet purchase offer to the county tax office, Valerie said, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. Because the original sale was so flawed, and the property is now flagged for multiple violations, the county is looking to clear it up. We can essentially buy back the house through the county, at a much lower price than market value, but still significantly more than the $14,000 Shane sold it for. It's a steep legal price for you, but it's still a steal compared to what it's actually worth. It's not a foreclosure, exactly, but it's a legal mechanism for the county to reclaim and resell a problematic property. It's completely above board on our end. It was expensive, a significant chunk of my savings. But it was the only way. It was buying back what was always mine. The process was quiet, deliberate. Valerie handled all the paperwork, filing the necessary documents with the county tax office. We didn't make a sound, didn't breathe a word to anyone. No public announcements, no social media posts. The less Shane and Jasmine knew, the better. 3 weeks later, a certified letter arrived at Jasmine's address. It wasn't from me, or from Valerie. It was from the county. A notice that the property at 123 Maple Drive, my mother's house, had been transferred due to a series of legal and tax irregularities. It stated that the new owner had taken possession, and Jasmine Barnes had 30 days to vacate the premises. I got a call from Valerie that afternoon. "It's done, Willow. The house is legally yours again. The deed was officially transferred this morning." A wave of relief, so profound it almost buckled my knees, washed over me. It was real. It was happening. I didn't post anything online. I didn't gloat. I simply waited. The next day, I was at my grocery store, picking up some essentials, when I saw Valerie. She was in the produce aisle, looking at avocados. I waved, and she smiled, but then her eyes darted to something behind me. I turned. Brad McCormick, the shady realtor, 38 years old, who had helped push the house sale through. I recognized him from the property records Valerie had pulled. He was standing a few aisles over, pretending to examine a carton of eggs, but his gaze was fixed on Valerie. He looked pale, his usual slick demeanor replaced with a nervous energy. Valerie walked over to me, her smile faltering. "Hey, Willow. Just got the call from the county. Everything's good." She leaned in closer, her voice dropping to a whisper. "Brad McCormick is here. He's been watching me." Just then, Brad seemed to make a decision. He walked quickly towards Valerie, his eyes flicking to me for a split second before focusing solely on her. He stopped just inches away, his voice low, urgent. "Valerie," he whispered, his eyes wide and a sheen of sweat on his forehead. "I know who she's working with. If this keeps going, we all go down." Brad McCormick's whispered threat in the grocery store didn't scare me. It energized me. It meant he knew. It meant they were feeling the heat. We all go down. That was the plan. Not just Shane, but everyone complicit. And now, with the house legally back in my name, it was time to stop being quiet. For months, I'd moved in the shadows, gathering evidence, pulling strings. Now, it was time to step into the light, but on my terms. I wasn't going to scream or yell. I was going to speak, calmly and clearly, and let the facts do the screaming for me. I decided to write an anonymous op-ed for the local paper. Valerie helped me craft it, making sure it was legally sound but still impactful. We focused on the broader issues: elder abuse, estate theft, and how easily vulnerable people could be exploited. I didn't name names, but I painted a picture that anyone in our small community who knew Shane Wallace would recognize. I wrote about how certain families treat daughters like ghosts and girlfriends like queens, a direct jab at Shane and Jasmine, and a subtle nod to Harmony's online taunts. I talked about the emotional toll, the betrayal, and the systemic loopholes that allowed such injustices to occur. The article ran online first, then in print a few days later. It hit a nerve. The comments section exploded. People shared their own stories of family disputes, of feeling helpless against opportunistic relatives. The local paper picked up on the traction and did a follow-up piece, interviewing a legal expert, not Valerie to keep her involvement discreet for now, about the complexities of probate law and the rise of estate fraud. While the article was making waves, Valerie and Pablo were connecting more dots. Brad's panicked whisper in the grocery store had been a tell. Pablo, with his IRS connections, started digging deeper into Brad McCormick's finances too. What they uncovered was a tangled web. "It's a full-blown real estate fraud ring, Willow," Pablo explained during a video call, his face grim. Brad wasn't just a realtor. He was the facilitator. He was doctoring signatures, backdating documents, and pushing through these quick, undervalued sales. Shane was just one of his clients, but a significant one. They were working together, exploiting estates where the deceased didn't have a clear will, or where the heirs were estranged or vulnerable. Valerie chimed in, "And Jasmine. She's not just Shane's girlfriend. She's been involved in some of these transactions too, acting as a straw buyer or helping to launder money through property flips. Her name is popping up on a few other suspicious deeds. This goes way beyond your mother's house." The IRS, already auditing Shane, now had a much bigger fish to fry. Pablo had provided them with enough preliminary evidence to launch a full-scale investigation into Brad, Shane, and their associates. The pressure was mounting, not just for Shane, but for everyone involved. Then, the inevitable happened. A few days after the op-ed went viral, a process server showed up at my apartment door. He handed me a thick envelope. Inside was a cease and desist letter from Jasmine Barnes's lawyer. It accused me of defamation, harassment, and intentional infliction of emotional distress. It demanded I remove the op-ed, stop all contact, and refrain from making any further statements about Jasmine or the property. I read the letter, then looked up at the process server, a small, knowing smile playing on my lips. "Are you serious?" I asked, a laugh bubbling up from deep inside me. It wasn't a polite laugh. It was a laugh of pure, unadulterated triumph. I took the letter, closed the door, and walked back to my kitchen, the paper crinkling in my hand. They were desperate. They were scared, and they were making mistakes. I sent a photo of the cease and desist letter to Valerie. Her reply was immediate. "Don't worry about it. It's a scare tactic. They're panicking." She was right. The next morning, my phone started buzzing. Not with calls, but with messages from friends and acquaintances. "Willow, have you seen this?" they asked. "It's everywhere." Someone had leaked Jasmine's personal photos. Not just the ones from my house, but a whole trove of them. Luxury bags, designer clothes, lavish vacations, photos that clearly contradicted her public persona and her financial situation as a supposed low-income buyer of my mother's house. There were also screenshots of what looked like fake tax write-offs, and even a few documents that hinted at stolen identities being used in other property transactions. The local reporter who had done the follow-up piece on estate fraud had gotten hold of them. The internet was having a field day. Jasmine's carefully curated online image was crumbling, replaced by a public narrative of greed and deception. The war had been declared, and I wasn't just changing the rules, I was rewriting the entire damn playbook. The leak of Jasmine's photos was the final push. The local reporter, now armed with a mountain of evidence from Pablo and Valerie, all carefully anonymized, of course, ran a scathing exposé. It detailed the real estate fraud ring, the doctored documents, the undervalued sales, and the suspicious financial dealings. Shane and Brad were named as key players, and Jasmine was heavily implicated. The article didn't just go local, it got picked up by a few regional news outlets. The pressure became unbearable. The 30 days Jasmine had to vacate the house passed, and she hadn't moved. She probably thought she could ignore the county notice, or that her cease and desist letter would intimidate me. She was wrong on both counts. It was a Tuesday morning, crisp and clear. I arrived at my mother's house with a sheriff's deputy and Valerie. The deputy, a stern-faced woman in her late 40s, held the court order for eviction. My stomach churned, a mix of nerves and grim satisfaction. This was it, the culmination of months of quiet work. We walked up the familiar pathway to the front door. The rose bushes Mom had loved were gone, replaced by a patch of scraggly weeds. The house looked wrong, like a cheap imitation of itself. I knocked, hard. A few moments later, the door swung open. Jasmine stood there, her face pale, her eyes wide with a mixture of fear and defiance. She was still wearing her expensive-looking loungewear, but the usual sparkle in her eyes was gone. "Jasmine Barnes?" the deputy asked, her voice flat and official. Jasmine nodded, her gaze darting between the deputy, Valerie, and me. Her eyes lingered on me, a flicker of hatred in their depths. "I'm Deputy Miller. I'm here to enforce a court-ordered eviction. This property has been legally transferred to Willowhunt. You have been given 30 days to vacate. Since you have not complied, you are now required to leave the premises immediately." Jasmine's mouth opened, but no words came out. She looked like a trapped animal. But this is my house," she stammered finally. "No, it's not," I said, my voice steady, devoid of emotion. "It hasn't been your house for weeks." The deputy stepped forward. "Ma'am, I need you to gather your essential belongings and leave. If you don't comply, I will be forced to escort you." Jasmine's defiance crumbled. She glared at me one last time, then turned and stumbled back into the house. We could hear her frantically grabbing things, muttering to herself. 10 minutes later, she emerged, dragging a large suitcase and a designer handbag. Her face was tear-streaked, mascara running down her cheeks. She looked pathetic. She avoided my gaze, handing the keys to the deputy, who then handed them to me. The weight of them in my palm felt like a victory. As Jasmine was being escorted to a waiting car, a black SUV screeched to a halt in front of the house. The driver's side door flew open, and out stepped Uncle Shane Wallace, 45, looking disheveled and frantic. He was followed by Harmony Davis, 45, her face contorted in a mask of fury. "What the hell is going on here?" Shane roared, spotting the deputy and Jasmine. "Willow, what have you done?" Before he could take another step, another car, an unmarked police vehicle, pulled up behind his SUV. 2 plainclothes officers emerged. "Shane Wallace?" one of them asked, holding up a badge. "We have a warrant for your arrest, 2 counts of tax fraud and forgery." Shane's face went ashen. He tried to protest, to argue, but the officers were firm. They cuffed him, reading him his rights right there on the lawn of my mother's house. He looked at me, his eyes wide with disbelief and a dawning horror. Harmony, meanwhile, had rushed to Jasmine's side, trying to comfort her. When she saw Shane being led away, she spun on me, her face red with rage. You did this!" she shrieked, pointing a trembling finger. "You ruined everything! You ruined the whole family!" I looked at her, then at the house, then back at her. Her words, once designed to cut, now felt hollow. I reached into my bag and pulled out a worn, folded document. It was a copy of my mother's original deed to the house, the one she'd held for decades. Then I pulled out a small, faded photograph. Me, at 8 years old, sitting on the front lawn, a gap-toothed smile on my face, my arm around my mom. Finally, I held up a few pages from Mom's journal, tear-stained entries about her love for this house, her dreams for it, her hopes for me. "I didn't ruin it, Harmony," I said, my voice quiet but firm, cutting through her hysteria. "You sold it. Your father sold it. You mocked me for grieving it. This was never just a house. This was her." "And you sold her for nothing!" Harmony stared at the documents, her mouth agape, her fury momentarily replaced by shock. She had nothing to say. Shane, now in the back of the police car, was still yelling, but his words were muffled. Jasmine was sobbing quietly in the passenger seat of her own car, being driven away by a friend she'd called. Harmony just stood there, frozen, watching them go. I turned and walked to the front door, the keys feeling heavy and real in my hand. I unlocked it, the click echoing in the sudden silence. Later that evening, as I sat alone in the quiet, empty house, the front door creaked. A soft, hesitant knock followed. I walked to the door, my heart pounding, and peered through the peephole. Standing on my porch, disheveled, pale, and terrified, were Shane and Jasmine. They looked like ghosts. They looked like they had nowhere else to go. They looked like they were begging to come in. The knock at the door was soft, hesitant, almost apologetic. But the faces I saw through the peephole were anything but. Shane and Jasmine, standing on my porch looking utterly broken. Shane, 45, usually so slick and confident, was pale and disheveled, his eyes wide with a desperate plea. Jasmine, 27, her face blotchy from crying, looked utterly defeated. They were terrified, and they were begging to come in. A part of me wanted to slam the door, to leave them out there in the cold, just as they had left me. But that wasn't my plan. My plan was to make them witness it, to make them feel every bit of what they had taken and what they had lost. I opened the door, just enough to meet their eyes. "What do you want?" My voice was flat, devoid of warmth. Shane took a step forward, his hands clasped in front of him. "Willow, please. We need to talk. Things are bad." "The police, the IRS. Jasmine has nowhere to go. Can we just come in? For a minute?" Jasmine nodded frantically, tears welling up again. "Please, Willow. We made a mistake. We're so sorry." Sorry. The word tasted like ash. I looked at them, truly looked at them. They weren't manipulative masterminds anymore. They were just two people facing the consequences of their actions, and they were terrified. Good. "Fine," I said, opening the door wider. "But you're not here to talk. You're here to listen, and to see." They shuffled inside, looking around nervously, as if expecting a trap. The house was still mostly empty, the furniture Jasmine hadn't taken gone, the walls bare. But I had been busy. "Follow me," I said, leading them into the living room. The first thing they saw was the photo wall. Not the one Mom had, but a new one I'd created. Every printed screenshot of Jasmine's Instagram posts, blown up and framed. Jasmine posing in my bedroom, the pool party where my tire swing used to be, her flaunting luxury bags she'd bought with what should have been my inheritance. Each image was a fresh wound, now displayed for them to see. Jasmine gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. Shane's eyes darted nervously from photo to photo. "Remember these?" I asked, my voice dangerously soft. "You thought you were so clever, didn't you, Jasmine? Flaunting your new life, mocking my grief online." Every single one of these posts, I saw them. I remembered them. I moved on, leading them through the house. In the dining room, I'd set up a small table. On it, neatly organized, were scanned copies of Shane's fraudulent tax returns, the ones Pablo had uncovered, showing his undeclared assets and zero income. Next to them were printouts of the property deeds for his 3 rental properties, along with the liens I had purchased. Shane's jaw tightened. He tried to speak, but I cut him off. This is where you thought you were so smart, Shane. Hiding your money, cheating the system. You thought no one would notice. You thought I was too busy grieving to care. I walked them into the kitchen, the room where the smell of burnt meatloaf still lingered in my memory. The kitchen was different now. I had started to restore it. The cheap, sparkly backsplash Jasmine had installed was gone, replaced with simple white subway tiles, just like Mom had always wanted. On the windowsill, I'd placed a small collection of Mom's old spice jars, the ones I'd found in the lockbox, the same ones she used to reach for when she cooked. The air felt lighter, cleaner. But on the counter, next to the restored spice jars, I had placed a stack of printouts, Harmony's Facebook rants, her mocking posts about the emo cousin who couldn't let go. Harmony wasn't here, but her words were. "She thought it was funny, didn't she, Shane?" I said, my voice rising slightly. "She thought it was hilarious that I was grieving, that I couldn't let go of my home, but she didn't know what she was laughing at. She was laughing at a daughter who just lost her mother and then had her home stolen by her own family." I turned to face them, standing in the center of the kitchen, the heart of the home. "This is where she laughed at my meatloaf," I said, my voice thick with emotion, but my eyes dry. "This is where we shared our last laugh, right here at this island." "Remember that?" "No. You were never here. You never cared about her, not really. Not enough to respect her memory or her home." I looked directly at Jasmine, her face a mask of misery. "You'll never smile in this house again," I whispered, the words a cold, hard promise. "Every corner of this place, every memory is tainted by what you did. You won't get to enjoy it, not ever." Jasmine broke down, a ragged sob tearing from her throat. She crumpled to the floor, burying her face in her hands, her shoulders shaking with silent sobs. Shane stood rooted to the spot, his face pale, his eyes wide with a terror that was finally, truly real. He couldn't even look at me. He just stared at the floor, defeated. I didn't flinch, not a muscle. Their tears, their fear, their brokenness. It was exactly what I had wanted. Jasmine's sobs echoed in the quiet kitchen, a raw, guttural sound that filled the space. Shane stood frozen, his face devoid of its usual cunning, replaced by a vacant stare. They were broken. Utterly, completely broken. I watched Jasmine for a long moment, her shoulders shaking, her designer clothes rumpled from her collapse. The satisfaction was there, a deep, resonant hum beneath my skin. But there was no joy in it. Not really. Just a quiet, cold sense of completion. "Get out," I said, my voice barely above a whisper, but it cut through the air like a knife. "Both of you." "Get out of my house." Shane finally stirred, his eyes finding mine. There was no defiance left, only a profound weariness. He put a hand on Jasmine's arm, pulling her gently to her feet. She didn't look at me, just stumbled out of the kitchen, Shane following close behind. I heard the front door open, then close with a soft click, and then silence. The days that followed were a blur of legal proceedings and quiet restoration. Shane, already released on bail after his initial arrest, was officially charged with multiple counts of tax fraud and forgery. The evidence Pablo had meticulously gathered, combined with Valerie's legal expertise regarding the fraudulent power of attorney and Brad McCormick's involvement in the wider real estate fraud ring, was overwhelming. The IRS investigation expanded, pulling in more people, unraveling more of their illicit dealings. Brad, the shady realtor, was also facing serious charges. Harmony, my cousin, vanished from social media. Her public rants ceased, her carefully curated online life going dark. I heard through the grapevine that she was dealing with the fallout of her father's legal troubles and the public shame of the news reports. She had lost her audience, her platform for mockery, and that, in itself, felt like a fitting consequence. Jasmine, facing a mountain of evidence regarding her complicity in the property transactions and the leaked photos hinting at identity theft, took a plea deal. She disappeared from the public eye, her name fading from the news cycles. I didn't know where she went, and I didn't care. Her world had imploded, and that was enough. Valerie called me a week after the eviction. "Willow, we could press charges against Jasmine for identity theft." Pablo found some pretty solid links in those leaked photos. I paused, looking around the kitchen, now truly mine. The smell of fresh paint was starting to replace the lingering scent of burnt meatloaf. "No," I said firmly. "They lost everything that mattered. Their reputation, their freedom, their sense of security. Shane's facing jail time. Jasmine's a pariah. Harmony's silenced. I won't waste another breath on them." Valerie was quiet for a moment. "Are you sure? You've been through a lot." "I'm sure," I replied. "I got back what was mine, and they got what they deserved. That's enough." The house slowly transformed. I stripped away all traces of Jasmine, painting over the garish colors, replacing the cheap fixtures. I restored Mom's rose garden, planting new bushes in the same spots. I found Mom's old photo albums in the storage unit and started rebuilding the family photo wall. But this time, it was just photos of Mom and me, and a few of her with her parents. It was a home again, not a monument to betrayal. A few weeks later, on a clear afternoon, I stood on the front porch, a small polished brass plaque in my hand. I carefully screwed it into the wall just above the front door, right where the house number used to be. The inscription was simple, elegant. Zariah's house. That evening, as dusk settled, casting long shadows across the lawn, I sat on the front steps, a mug of chamomile tea warming my hands. The air was cool, carrying the scent of newly turned earth from the garden. The house behind me felt solid, real, finally at peace. They had knocked once, desperate and terrified. Fate, it seemed, had knocked louder. And I, Willow, had simply opened the door. A few days later, an envelope arrived in the mail. No return address, no stamp, just my name handwritten on the front. It looked like it had been slipped directly into my mailbox. I opened it carefully. Inside, folded neatly, was a faded, handwritten recipe card. My mother's familiar cursive filled the page. Zariah's famous meatloaf. And underneath the ingredients, a single stark line, written in a different hand, one I didn't recognize. "Revenge doesn't heal, but sometimes it feeds."